Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 14th, 2012 meeting of the Goffstown Planning Board. As usual, we'll begin with introductions. Go around the room. Brian?
My name is Brian Rose. I'm the Planning and Zoning Administrator.
Bill Devanza, Selectman.
John Heichel.
Mark Warden.
Gail Breck, Recording Secretary.
Tim Redmond, Chairman.
Ryan Hansen.
Barbara Griffin, member.
Richard Meany.
Simone Himmel, alternate.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. First order is the minutes from the May 24th meeting. Anybody have any discussion, corrections,
Motion
changes?
to approve.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor by, who was it, John or Phil?
Phil.
Phil. Seconded by Mark. Does anybody have any discussion or changes on the minutes as presented? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Chair votes yes. Thank you. Before we get started, we have a couple of correspondence and FYI. There are two applications here for us from the Goffstown Public Works Department. The applications are made to NHDES for wing wall repairs on West Union Street. I believe that's correct. And culvert repair on Walnut Hill Road. We don't take action on these. They're here as courtesy from the Department of Public Works and for information. So if anybody wants to see either of these applications, they'll be available for the applicants to, or the members to look at after the meeting. Second thing is, we have two letters that have been sent to us, or actually not sent to us, sent by us to people who would like to occupy space in the old Shaw's Plaza. I'll read the name of the first one. I'll let Brian do a brief summary. It's the Dollar Tree Store, to be located in the old Family Dollar store when they vacate the premises. Brian?
Yeah, that's essentially what it is. Family Dollar is moving into their building sometime later this year once their building is completed. And once that happens, Family Dollar Tree is swooping right in to scoop up that space. And you know, I essentially wrote them a letter stating that it was not going to require a site plan or anything due to not being a change of use. And so that was the gist of the letter. And the same thing actually really goes for the second one too.
Second one is Hubert's Department Store, which is going to move into the old Rite Aid building,
Right.
or condominium, whatever you want to call it there.
Yeah, Hubert's is a department store for outdoor clothing, outfitting. So I think they may have other sports accessories and things like that that go along with, but essentially it's a retail establishment, whereas Rite Aid before that was retail as well, and that whole plaza is retail, so or mostly retail. So again, not a change of use and didn't require a site plan, and that was the gist of my letter. So
I think it's great that those are not going to sit empty.
yeah.
Anybody have any comments or questions or things to say about this? Barbara?
Question, I know these are standard letters, so references to signage or work doesn't mean anything, but I'm just curious in regards to the dollar store, is it a move or expansion into the space next door?
Two different stores.
Family Dollar's
Family
moving
Dollar,
out.
no, is Dollar Trees a move or an expansion?
They're expanding into Goffstown. They have
No.
they don't have a location in Goffstown currently.
What's the store next to it now?
Big Lots.
Oh, okay,
So Big Lots
Thank
and
you. I
Dollar
was
Tree
getting
will
the
be
names
next door neighbors instead of
No,
Big
I got
Lots
it.
and Family Dollar.
I got it.
Any other comments or questions for Brian? Okay. We don't need any motions for us to approve these letters for Brian at this point? Okay. There is a copy of a timber cut permit for Ivan and Joanne Beliveau, map 9, lot 99, East Dumbarton Road. There is a full package here. The information is from the assessor, Scott Bartlett, to the Board of Selectmen. If anybody has any comments, questions, or wants to know about it, it's up here, you can see it later. Once again, we don't take any action, we just get it as a courtesy.
Just as a side note on future timber cuts, you know, after the question came up last time about whether or not, you know, those timber cuts were part of a subdivision or had additional regulations that might be on them, I'm gonna go to the effort to write a letter just to anyone requesting a timber cut, stating that, you know, we have wetlands and we'd like you to try to minimize your impacts to them as best as possible. We really don't have a lot of teeth to do that, but because our zoning ordinance essentially allows for logging operations within the wetland conservation district zones. So what I do want to do, though, is encourage them to minimize their impacts as best as possible. So I just want to kind of write up a letter that will say, you have a wetland on your property, please try to minimize it, and that'll be that. So.
Everybody got a copy of our new rules of procedure in your packet. So that was voted on at the prior meeting and accepted, so everyone knows about them and knows what they are, so they are in effect. All right, that's out of the way. There are some documents on the table in front of you with a big rubber band around them. They are the Conservation Commission Piscataquag River Management Plan Update 2010. We are not going to discuss it tonight. It is for an upcoming meeting, so one receipt. Is there anything else left, Brian, before we begin old business?
I don't believe so.
All right, so the first item on the old business tonight is map 15, lot 221. Request for a waiver of site plan. Celestina Percillo, is that right? Did I say your name correctly?
Perfectly.
Thank you, Celestina. Please come up. Before you begin, last week, or last meeting, there was discussion of the old bus, the ice cream bus, and everyone in their packet has a letter from Dan LaRochelle, the owner of the property, stating that he acknowledges the previous approval. He no longer owns the vehicle and has no intentions of bringing it back. So that is part of the record, that the bus is no longer to be considered. So at this time, I will have Brian give everyone a quick update if we need it on this item, on the agenda item, and then we can move forward.
Okay. Well, essentially, after the planning board meeting last month, we met as a technical review committee, and we invited Celestina to come and, you know, talk out the issues that had been brought up by the fire department regarding distances to building and parking and other issues that had been brought up in his memo. And, you know, we essentially kind of helped her draft up a site plan or a sketch of a site plan that shows whether or not it could possibly be placed on that within those setback requirements. And we did find that it was possible to do that in the configuration that she was hoping to do it. She was hoping not to turn the trailer because she didn't want it to block a good portion of the front side of that building. So rather than block it like that, she wanted to have it vertical to the perpendicular to the building per se. And so we did find that space allows for that within the setback requirements of 10 feet from the property line and then 6 feet from both the parking and the building. And so that's essentially where we've placed it. And then we discussed the exterior tanks. The fire department was okay with the location being exterior, and on the building side, they had discussed that they weren't big enough tanks to require the type of separation that could have possibly been required had they been larger tanks. So, the other thing that was discussed was wheel stops. So that's been shown on the site plan for 3 of the stalls that would be essentially abutting the trailer, and you know, we'll try to get she'll be required to get those in place before she opens up. Again, as you stated, we did discuss the letter about the ice cream truck prior, and I had that discussion with Dan LaRochelle and confirmed, and I asked him to send that letter in, and he did so. So, I don't know if there was any other issues that were really prevalent that the board had brought up back then, but I think that was about it for the major issues that had been brought up. So,
Thank you, Brian. All right, we'll need a motion for item number 1 on page 5.
I'll make a motion that we determine that the application does not have a regional impact and accept the application for review. Second.
Motion by Richard, seconded by Mark Warden. Any discussion of that motion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed? And, what's the other word? Abstention? Seeing none, the chair votes yes. Thank you. Okay, we can move on now. The applicant's presentation is next.
There were a couple other issues.
Identify yourself for the record.
Sorry?
Identify yourself for the record,
Celestina
please.
Percillo. There were a couple other issues brought up at the last meeting that, I looked into. Somebody brought up snow plowing, and that's going to be done by the property owner. There is a toilet available for my use at King's Bowling Lane. Someone brought that up. And our hours will be the same, or actually mine may be a little bit shorter. But their hours are 10 to 9, and mine may be 11 to 9 or earlier if I find out that there isn't any business that late. Somebody asked about the extension cord. The extension cord will plug directly into the building right behind the trailer and will be approximately 10 feet long. And the trash and water removal will be done privately off-site by me daily. And I think that's about everything, unless I missed something.
Okay. Good. Okay, we have questions for the applicant. Barbara?
This is probably not a question for the applicant, but you might know. That building is vacant right now, right? There's a for rent sign. It's been
Right.
vacant for a little while. And it looks like, and you can sort of see this on the diagram that you did, that the main access to the building is sort of off of the parking lot. You can see where there are actually steps on your little diagram in the corner.
Right, it's off to the side.
Off to the side. But there's actually a door on the street side right by where your trailer is going. And there's no steps to it. But do you have any idea what that door was used for? Because I can't tell whether you're blocking it or not. And that's not your issue for operation, but it's my issue for approval, which I'm for. But I want you to know I have some concerns if this gets rented and the fire department's requiring that door to be an access for fire and you're right in front of it.
Right. I don't believe it's blocking the door. I think that's something I would have noticed when I went down
Okay.
and took measurements. And
Okay.
besides that, when I was originally talking to Mr. LaRochelle several months ago about placing my trailer there was a business in operation and it didn't have any conflicts.
Okay, so not blocking the door is not an issue. Okay. And like I said, it wasn't clear to me that it got used. My guess is it's a fire department access issue for the building from driving or looking at the building. Okay.
Anyone else? Phil?
Thank you. I guess this, on the corner, there's a notation that it says that's up towards the side street, well, actually on the very corner, just inside the 10-foot setback. There's a notation on it, just says 10-foot parking. Could you explain that?
Front yard and parking setback?
No, it's right up to it. It's right here. It says
Yeah,
10-foot
that's-
parking.
That's the setback line,
The word setback apparently is missing from the sentence.
okay.
Okay, so that's,
It's a
that's,
setback line,
that's
that's
where
all
you're
it's-
just pointing out that it has the parking setback, okay? And a follow-up to that is if you go down to where the wheel stops are, you show 3 wheel stops and 3 parking spaces, and the drawing shows that that one wheel stop and parking space goes into that 10-foot yard and parking setback?
Yeah, the reason those are shown and, the wheel stop is crossing over that and the lines are there is because those are existing parking spaces that were, laid out prior to when we had that regulation of 10 foot, as a setback for parking. So those being existing, we didn't feel it was necessary to remove those, as parking stalls, but just to,
If I may, Brian, you notice all around the property, they're all the way around the whole perimeter, Phil. They're on the
yeah.
Henriette Street side, they're on the corner of the bowling alley. All those parking spaces appear to be grandfathered, and they do encroach.
Well, I guess that's why I'm asking the question, because the concern that I have is that these parking spaces that are there, I mean, by approving this the way it is, going into that 10-foot setback, then we are approving parking spaces going into the setback, and I don't think that that's what we should be doing.
Well, the parking spaces are already existing, they're already approved.
With King Lane's parking spaces.
They're grandfathered.
I,
Here's the difference. If we waive the site plan, it doesn't matter. If we require a site plan, then it does matter.
but the problem that I have is that we have no site plan for this property,
That's right, and the request is to waive the site plan, Phil.
for the entire parcel.
That's what it says. So the map, 15 lot 221, which is the entire parcel, except for maybe a portion of the other part where they tore the house down, I'm not sure.
Okay, but I guess,
No, it is, I'm guessing. I don't know, Phil. It's outlined on the map here. Is that all one parcel, Brian, including the bowling alley and both the existing structure and the one that was torn down? Is that all one parcel?
Yeah, it's been merged over time to make a larger parcel from.
And it is map
smaller ones.
15 lot 221. It's not
That's the lot. number.
divided.
right, so I guess what I think we should do then, if that's the case, because the only thing that we're really approving is the use of this particular use on this corner of the parcel. So I will want to make sure that the approval that we do does not make all these other parking spaces go into the setback. Because what we don't have is there has never been a site plan for this entire parcel that's been approved with these parking spaces. These parking spaces were just laid out, had nothing to do with planning board requirement. They were just laid out at one point in time. So I think we need to make it that parking space going over the setback specific to this application and this particular use. Because my concern is if you just allow it there, then you'd be allowing it for any other use, any place on the property, which is not appropriate.
So why don't,
I think we're probably gonna say the same thing. We could just make it,
Well, let Brian go.
you know, we're just gonna make a note, could we just make a notation that we're gonna allow this one parking space to satisfy what Phil was just saying and include that in the wording?
Are you saying to disallow it or allow it?
Allow it. I think that what Phil is saying is specifically that we want to make sure that that it's a precedent just for this parking space and not open up a can of worms in the back. Is that about what you're saying, Phil?
Correct, because we're asking to waive a site plan, but there is no site plan, there is no existing site plan for this entire parcel of property.
But we're waiving the the responsibility that she gets a site plan. I don't think we're waiving anything zoning-wise. I think we're waiving just the responsibility of the
No,
site
no,
plan.
I understand that. I just want to make sure that down the road, that it doesn't look like that we approved a site plan that shows parking spaces that go into the setback.
Okay, fair enough.
Barbara, you want to add to that?
Well, I'm just looking at number 4, which is the actual vote, and trying to decide whether procedurally we want to make it 1 or 2 votes, because I think there's a waiver of the site plan, and then I think we could make a separate motion to allow the trailer to be placed on site. And we could make the trailer placement on site subject to location as set forth on the hand-drawn drawing, and operation not to begin until placement of the parking barriers on the 3 spaces, which are not deemed to constitute a permitted space. I mean, I'm trying to think of language that deals with it, so we actually do 2 motions. We waive the site plan requirement and make the findings, and then we do another one as to, because what we're really talking about is the trailer location and operation, and the operation then is subject really to the placement of barriers by the trailer as set forth on the attached drawing, and there are a couple of other things, so then it's just that I would want to make, so we could make it 2 separate motions. And I think it handles your issue in regards to the
And that-
parking and incorporates.
Still gets the job done.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Any other comments or by the board members? Any questions for the applicants by the board?
Yeah, I wasn't writing that down, sorry.
All right, I'll make a motion to waive the site plan requirement for the Another Castle LLC DBA Burger Time request at 751 Mast Road, map 15, lot 221, as the site plan requirement as to a strict conformity would pose an unnecessary hardship to the applicant, and waiver is not contrary to the spirit and the intent of the regulations.
So Barbara's made a motion,
Second.
seconded by Richard. Is there any discussion about that motion? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of Barbara's motion as presented, which is the first part of 4 and item A, is that correct, Barbara?
Correct.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm opposed. Abstentions? Okay, it passes. What? 1, 2, 3, 6 to 1.
All right, I'll make a motion for approval of the operation of Another Castle LLC DBA Burger Time at map 15, lot 21, subject to the following conditions. A, the trailer is placed on site as depicted on the hand-drawn drawing of the site presented to the planning board at its regular meeting of June 14th. 2, that wheel stops are in place at any existing parking space which abut the placement of the trailer prior to operation. 3, that disposal of trash and water is handled off-site nightly. 4, that the hours of operation are the same or less than those of King Bowling Lanes. And 5, that access to the door of the building on the lot located at map 15, lot 221 is not blocked by access by the trailer.
Barbara's made a motion. I won't bother reading it back. I think everybody heard it clearly. And do I have a second on Barbara's motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Phil. Any discussion on the motion?
Yes, something Barbara said was, she said conditional upon putting wheel stops on any parking space abutting the location of the trailer.
Right.
But this drawing shows 4 parking spaces. the way I read it.
Oh,
I'd rather
the
you
one
say
right
that-
by the road?
Yeah,
No, I don't think I don't think that's lined out. Is that one right by the road lined up?
That's technically a parking space, I think.
Is it lined out?
I'd like to hear a friendly
There's enough
revision
room.
that it's only those 3 per the site plan.
Well, abutting the trailer location per the site plan. Yeah, that's my intent.
I'd
So
like
be-
to limit it to those 3 per this
Well-
plan.
Okay, that's fine. To me, in regardless, just so you understand, that doesn't abut the trailer anyway, so that's fine. I mean the 3 where the wheel stops are. Gail, can you make it so it's clear?
You concur, Mark?
Yes, thank you.
Do you want to amend, so the motion's been amended. Is the second going to be amended?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right, any discussion on the motion?
I have a
Brian?
discussion on the hours of King's Bowling Lane. Do we know that that's 7 days a week?
They're closed on Monday, and that's the day I plan to be closed as well.
Okay.
It's pretty traditional for restaurants.
Any other questions or discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm opposed. Abstentions? 6-1-0, approved.
You all set?
All right, thank
Good luck.
you.
I look forward to
Thank
the
you.
opening.
Good luck.
Get 'em.
Good luck.
Wildly successful.
Good night.
Okay, the next application under old business is a completeness review and final site plan review for a proposed 4-unit multifamily building. Don Lavasser, Laurier Street, Zone Industrial. This application was approved back in 2008, but since then, the approval has expired and the applicant is coming back to ask for the approval to be reinstated. Brian, could you give the members of the board who were not here at the time a rundown on what's going on?
Yes. Essentially, this property is located on Laurier Street, adjacent to where the Surratt Fields is. The property directly north of this property is the Surratt Field, and is zoned industrial, just as the Surratt Field property is. However, most of the surrounding property is zoned residential. And this being a small lot in the industrial zone is a non-conforming lot. They did have to go through the zoning process, and they obtained appropriate approvals for what they are requesting. They needed a few variances and a special exception. Special exception was to develop a non-conforming lot. Variances were, I don't have them all, and, well, they're in the report. But essentially, they were for minor things relating to setbacks or other issues with the site, use on the site. Yeah, use on an industrial property to have residential multifamily units is not allowed in the zoning ordinance. So that was one thing that they approved. There were no conditional use permits required. The site plan was approved prior to this coming to you, so it was approved and signed, and then the approval, this signature plan was allowed to lapse because development never occurred on the site.
It was extended once, I believe.
It was extended once, and that only expired maybe a year ago.
Last year.
Yeah. And so, this is essentially them coming back to you requesting to reinstate that approval. There was one change that we had them make, and they had to request an additional variance actually because of it. I think back when the first approval had happened, it was noticed that they had not done their setbacks correctly on the site plan. The 50-foot where abutting residential district rule was missed, and so I had them put that in, and they got the appropriate variance for that. I don't believe it changes anything really, because that property next to them has that big swale that's built into it, and with the easement that's to the town that the town has built that swale on there. And so, really, I mean, to try to do any development on the other side of that swale between that and the property would be inconceivable a little bit. So, I would say that you're getting a 50-foot setback anyway, because you're extending that distance all the way to the other side of the swale.
Bless you.
So, it's actually probably more than 50 feet to where you could actually get any development on that parcel. That really was the only other change. The other reason why they had come to the town wanting to get this reinstated quickly was due to the fact that the town is working on Laurier Street this summer, and they want to be able to make sure to have an approved plan to put in any sewer stubs that they wanted to. I don't know that that's actually a requirement. In talking to Kathy Hooton from the Sewer Commission, she seemed to think that anybody could put in a stub if they wanted to, during the process. And so, I don't know that that's really an issue or not, but, they felt it necessary to come to the town, request reapproval, just in case. So, that being said, they had already addressed all the conditions of approval on the prior approval, because they had gotten their plans signed. However, I just relisted the applicable conditions conditions subsequent, and I also relisted the conditions of obtaining stamps and signatures and providing digital files to the town. The conditions subsequent were just to approve Goffstown Sewer Commission approval and Manchester Waterworks approval. So those were relisted as conditions of approval for this recommendation. But essentially, it's my recommendation that the board reapprove the site plan for this property. And after having done the items 1 through 4, public hearing and determining of no regional impact, and hearing from the applicant and resolving any remaining issues. So,
All right, Brian, I have a few questions for you. The variances that were granted, did any of them have any expiration dates?
For
For this
the
project.
ones that were just recently granted, any variance has a 2-year expiration.
So they've been back and they have new variances in place?
Correct.
Okay,
They just got them approved last week.
okay. Have there been any changes in our zoning regulations that would affect discussion on this project?
Not to my knowledge. I know that the zoning ordinance has been amended a few times over the past few years, but since this was approved, it really hasn't had any major changes in the zoning ordinance.
All right, and I see on the staff review part, the TRC was not scheduled. Why did you feel that a TRC was not necessary?
Due to the fact that the plan had been previously approved and staff had been okay with it as it was currently designed, and the fact that there have really been no essential changes that would affect this plan, we deemed it not necessary to re-review engineering and all of that.
You say no essential changes. Are there changes to the plan from the original plan? Shaking your head no?
No, sir.
Thank
Other than that one setback line, which we corrected. We haven't touched the plan since it was approved.
Okay. All right, then, I would like a motion on our site plan recommendations on page 7 for item number 1.
So moved.
Barbara's made a motion, and read it out for us, Barbara.
I'll make a motion that this project has no regional impact and that we accept the plan application as complete and ready for review.
Motion by Barbara. Anybody second that?
Yes, I do.
Second by Richard Meany.
Yeah, I have a question.
Bill?
It's a technical question. And, Brian, the application that's in front of us, that says application for development review, is that part of, is this form part of the application that the motion that's on the table is discussing, is being complete.
Yes.
So if there's a blank space on this form, is the application complete? I mean, it's a technical question.
Well, why don't you just,
If you go on the second page, item
oh, there's
17,
also, yeah, there's 17, 18.
I guess that's for the board to determine whether or not they feel that needs to be addressed.
Well, why wasn't it then? In your opinion, Brian, you're the one that accepted this.
It's, I don't know that it's, there's a reason why, I mean, that I was probably just missed. The questions that they're asking are, in the application, it asks if you have reviewed the Goffstown master plan, it asks for a yes or no, a checkbox. And then, whether or not you wish to waive the 65-day decision clock. It's required by the RSAs. And neither of those were checked.
I think Mr. Lavasser got this filled out, and it was kind of a rush to get it in, and we helped him put the plans together, but I didn't actually review the application. I think those were just missed.
What about the third page, Brian? Nothing is filled out on the application checklist.
Again, I mean, I didn't check this one as closely because it had been previously approved. So in essentially reinstating the prior approval, you know, I didn't really look as closely at this at this plan and everything. So that's just an oversight, I guess.
I have the same concerns as Phil. This is an incomplete application. And we're voting to accept this application as complete and ready for review. I guess a vote by the body will decide whether we're going to accept it as complete and ready for review.
Question.
Barbara?
Brian, I noted that, and maybe we need to deal with the motion again. I might be we can deal with my motion, I guess, and then go forward, but I'm looking at the notice of decision from before, and there were two other, are essentially what you're talking about tonight, in regards to the approval that was originally obtained on this site, back at a meeting on 5/22/08. But there were conditions on the plan for A through N, some of which were in regards to construction issues.
Okay.
And would not have been something done on the plan. You know, you'd get plan approval, you'd go through and you'd note on the plan. I don't even know. Is there a note on the plan for stabilized construction entrance?
Yes, Raymond Shea from Sanford Survey. We addressed every condition of approval, was reviewed by Public Works and by Planning, and that's the only reason they signed the plan in May of '09, I believe, because we did address every single, we actually put there's a letter of construction sequencing, which I think I have a copy of, that addressed a lot of those. So everything on that piece of paper was addressed, submitted, reviewed by Public Works and Planning, approved, and then the site plan was signed almost a year later. So it took us, some of the conditions were granting the town easements on the drainage
Right.
on the abutting property, which they didn't have easements on. Those easements were submitted and granted, so,
And they have been recorded.
yeah,
They are in the
everything was
So the granite
addressed.
bounds and iron
Everything,
fences,
everything,
it
everything.
literally
Every
everything
single
else.
thing
Okay.
on the condition of approval was done, or they wouldn't have signed the plan. And I understand the board's looking at this application and say, you know, it's not all there. And I think, you know, in Brian's defense, he was looking at this, well, you know, because it had a very rigorous approval, review the first time, regulations haven't changed, the engineering standards hadn't changed. I think, you know, in his defense, he probably felt, okay, you know, not that this is a rubber stamp. I mean, obviously, you can ask as many questions you want and go through go through the review process tonight. But as far as the checklist items, the checklists are basically the same from 3-4 years ago. So, to allay your fears that we've left a bunch of stuff off, we haven't. It was all done 100% for the first approval. And again, we actually we didn't get an extension of a conditionally approved plan. We got an extension of a final plan that was approved. So it's been looked at many times, and you know, I apologize for maybe not giving not giving the board as much information as you usually get. And that was probably one of it was the speed. Mr. Lavasser was trying to get this in as quickly as possible so we could pull his permit, because at the time he thought he needed an approved plan to put a sewer stub in, and he wants to beat the paving. So that's I guess an excuse, if you will, that all the items are checked, but trust me, all the items are complete and were complete and reviewed. And Megan's here, she can attest to that, because we worked very closely with her, addressing all the technical items.
Phil?
Yeah, I understand everything that's been said, and I appreciate it. The only difficulty that I have is that when you go to page 3, general information, it says the applicant shall complete this checklist as part of every subdivision and site plan application, period. This applicant shall either, and it goes on, it just uses the word shall for a subdivision or a site plan application, and that's what we have here.
With permission of a second, I'd like to amend my motion to find that this site plan is complete in light of the fact that this is an application for a signed plan for which previous conditions of approval have been met, and in light of the applicant's agent's representation that all of the conditions of application have been met, to include, I will note that at least the applicant agent, I am quite confident, has reviewed the Goffstown master plan, a box that was not checked off on the second plan. I don't need to see him nodding to know that he has reviewed that document. And noting further that conceptual proposals do not apply, and as to the final subdivision and site plan, we already have a site plan, so I think you can argue that none of those things apply. But I will say that we have, I will note, and Gail, I have no idea what you're gonna do with this, knock this motion down. Final subdivision and site plan, 1, notice of decision and any required variance or special exception has been included in the packet before the board tonight. So, based upon those representations and somehow a little more condensed, can you make the motion say that all those things are presented? I don't know whether my second
We'll give
would
Gail a
amend.
minute to get caught up here.
Oh, she's good,
I got
she
it.
can do it.
I got it.
She got it.
And your second will agree to all of that stuff.
So the second has
However
been-
she writes it.
All right.
Richard
And I
has-
would just like to note for the record that I was so thrilled to have notice of variance and exceptions all having been obtained before this was before the board. I completely missed that there were boxes not checked off. Brian, I want to tell you, this was very exciting to look at, because all of these extensions that we have been looking at for the last couple of years that have ZBA action have not been coming before this board with the approvals prior to coming before this board. And this is wonderful. So, I got a little overexcited when I looked at it.
Any discussion of the motion? I'd like to say that I hope we're not setting a precedent for future applicants to come in and do the same thing.
If it wasn't for the fact that the site plan was signed and all the conditions had been met, I would not have done it. That's why I asked about the notice of decision of 2008.
Well, even with all respect to the applicant and speed, it doesn't take that long to fill out 2 pages.
I understand.
I'm throwing it right back across the table over there, because the excuse is that they didn't have time to fill it out because they were in a rush to make the application. Well, they certainly had time to check a few boxes and sign it and put a little information in. So I just want to make sure that we don't set a standard here for future applicants.
I'll
Anybody
make
else
sure-
have anything to
I'll
say?
make sure I address.
Not you, Ray, I
No,
mean,
well, I know, but
and we don't
I-
want, you're good,
I should have worked with Mr. Lasher a little closer. I let him do too much by himself.
that's fine. All right, no more discussion on the motion. Barbara has a motion on the floor relating to item 1 on our site plan recommendation. All those in favor of item 1, or Barbara's motion, I should say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? And chair votes yes. All right, now we've already got a little out of you, Ray. Now you can do your applicant's presentation.
Well, Brian covered quite a bit. To reiterate, it's a 4-unit residential building. This lot was at one time thought to be part of a larger piece abutting that Mr. Lavasser owns, and after it was surveyed, it was found that it was a standalone lot. That's why it's kind of in an odd, small industrial lot where it is. And it at one time wasn't even on the tax map as a separate lot. So that was rectified, and then Mr. Lavasser came through the process of getting the use variance, because the lot's too small for an industrial use. So we thought this was an appropriate use that fit well, and he received the proper variances, came before the planning board, obtained the site plan approval, and just over time, again, did get an extension. As you know, the lot's was used as a staging for some of the construction out, and I think that kind of delayed his going forward. But with the variances expired, we just waited till now, till the site was cleared, and received all the variances again, and the special exemption, and now we're here tonight to request the board reapprove this application.
I'm glad you brought up the part about the staging.
Yes.
You are going to adhere to your original plan, even though that lot was used as a staging lot, you're gonna put it all back?
Yeah, and I've been out there, I don't know that it was altered that much, to be quite honest. It looks pretty close to the grade that was originally. They had a lot of stuff there, but I don't think they altered the terrain too much. You know, they obviously had piles and things, but I think with everything gone, it doesn't look much different than it did when we did our original survey. And so, yes, we're adhering to the plan as it's presented.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for the applicant? Barbara?
I don't have a question for the applicant, but I have a question for Megan.
Well, can we invite Meg to come forward and,
Well, she's here at the meeting, so I
I know
wanna
she
know
is.
if she's got a comment on this application.
The only actual question I had, I was just looking through all the conditions to remind myself, they are all taken care of. The only one that, I don't recall it was addressed, which to me would be a condition subsequent anyway, is submit shop drawings with engineer stamp for retaining wall. I don't have
Right.
anything in my folder on that. I don't believe that was ever submitted. That's typically something that's done once the site goes to construction. So
Right.
if that could be left as an approval condition tonight, if
Right, that was, the retaining wall is like 2.5, 3 feet high, and that was when we submit for, prior to construction and building permit, we would submit a design retaining wall. That was part of a subsequent approval.
what is the regulation for a wall? What is the height when it has to become an engineered wall? Isn't it
It's higher than that,
higher
but-
than what you're on?
But we agreed to show, a detail of a wall.
Because I know, I
We
think,
weren't sure exactly what kind, so we, and it isn't a tall wall, but it does drop off, so it's holding up a little patio, so we agreed to, I believe, when we submit the building plans for review, we would submit the wall at that time, just to have anyone look at it that wants to.
just for the record, you're doing it voluntarily, you're not required to do it by the building statute.
Probably, yeah,
I
but
know you aren't.
because we didn't know exactly what type of wall or the make or material, we just decided to do it that way,
Thank you, Ray.
or agreed to.
Anybody else have any other questions or comments for this applicant? Okay, with that, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone in the audience have anything to say about this application? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. Are there any remaining issues this board would like to discuss or has to be resolved to move forward? Okay, time for a motion.
Okay, I guess it's my night. Motion, to approve the site plan, subject to conditions precedent A and B as listed on a report tonight, appropriate professional stamps and signatures and provision of digital files, AutoCAD submission, and North American vertical datum, and conditions subsequent, Goffstown Sewer Commission approval, Manchester Waterworks approval, and the submission of shop drawings for retaining wall prior to the issuance of a building permit,
Are there any other outstanding
with an
issues?
engineering stamp.
Are there any other outstanding issues that need to be added to that motion before we complete the motion? Okay, Barbara, your motion stands. Anybody want to second Barbara's
I'll
motion?
second it.
Seconded by John. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Chair votes yes.
We thank you very much and appreciate your working with us in
Thank
this
you.
application.
Thank you, Mr. Lavassa. Thank you, Meg. Brian, is any other business for the board this evening?
No.
No.
Motion to adjourn.
Well, can we hang around and take our 8:30 break?
Mr. Chairman,
No.
do you expect us to review this on the next meeting?
I would defer to Brian on that. Brian put it out. I'm not sure what's going on.
What's going on?
Please redo that and come to the meeting ready to discuss. Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission is going to be making a presentation regarding those two documents. And so,
Will they be asking us to approve them or give them our blessing?
at this point in time, we didn't notice it for any public hearings for you to approve. I felt it better that we bring it to you at least once and present it to you at least once prior to doing anything like asking you to adopt it or accept it or whatever it may be. I know that the Conservation Commission had recommended accepting it as reference document, but not adopting it as part of the master plan. So, if that's what the board wishes to do, then we'll set it up for a public hearing on a subsequent meeting, and we'll hold the public hearing and do that.
Okay, thanks.
Motion to adjourn.
Not yet.
Second.
Denied. I just want everybody to know there was an all-boards meeting on Tuesday evening, Phil?
Yes.
And the all-boards meeting
No, Monday.
Monday night. It was an extension of the selectmen's meeting. And I attended as a planning board chair and as the CIP chair. They discussed the CIP program at length at the meeting because of the fact that the CIP program is the one that gets cut the most initially when these budget hearings begin. So it was debated and discussed by all the members of the different boards and chairmen that were there. And I will let this board know that I stated for the record that we have had a massive denial of CIP projects. In this past year, we approved only 16% of all CIP proposals that were forwarded by the planning board. The year before, it was something like 60%. And in the prior years, it was closer to 70, 80, 90. It was way up there in the out years going back 5 or 6 years. So I suggested to the Board of Selectmen and the committee members that were there that we need to change the way we do CIP. We used to do capital reserve saving plans for each item that the town needed, whether it's a grader, a garbage truck, a library addition, or whatever. And my suggestion as the CIP chairman was that we need to stop putting up big-ticket items for the voters. $550,000 fire engine, $300,000 VACCON, $400,000 grader, all these big-ticket items, it scares them into voting no on these items. And we are falling backwards in some areas. So I suggested that we go back to the capital reserve savings plan that they abandoned several years back for this other program. So I just want to let you know what I told them at the meeting. Now, you will all have a chance to review the CIP matrix when we bring it before the planning board for approval in about 4 weeks. So I just want to let you know what I told the board. I think we would do better as a town to save small amounts of money towards projects and build up a little over the years so we can actually do something, as opposed to throwing monstrous numbers out there and they just getting all voted out flatly. Now, we all have our opinions whether we need them or not, or the projects are necessary or not, but at some point it will circle around full circle and the town will suffer as a result of all the negative votes. So with that, I'm gonna, yes, John?
Question. Why, and I've always asked this, why are those items go in CIP, and why don't the selectmen vote on whether or not they're gonna approve to buy because they approve to spend the rest of the budget?
I think the selectmen and the budget committee decide to include them in the budget or not. They are not separate warrant articles when they come to us. We recognize certain items that are warrant articles. We recognize the school additions as they are going to be warrant articles, so it's up to the voters to ultimately decide on them as separate articles.
So the budget committee would need to put them in the budget.
Well, it's up to the budget committee and the selectmen to include vehicles, capital projects and such as part of the budget or not. If they become part of the budget, then they probably run the risk of the whole budget failing by having it built up too much with too many. I mean, this is not what they told me. This is what I'm making an assumption. A lot of these items have been put out as warrant articles to try to get them passed. I assume, I don't know the reasoning. I don't know the Board of Selectmen's mindset or the Budget Committee's mindset. But I do know that we have had a very high failure rate. Last year was the worst in the 8 years that I've been on CIP, this is the worst it's ever been. And I don't think it'll be much better this year, unfortunately. But that is the will of the taxpayers. I'm just saying that if you want a new car and you're driving your old clunker, you put away a couple of $1,000s a year over 3 or 4 years, and then you can finally say, well, I've got a $12,000 down payment, now I can buy a car. The other thing that I pointed out to them was that the only money that's really available right now is grant money from the federal government and Homeland Security, which is also the federal government. And we've had a very successful grant writing program in Goffstown by the fire chief, mostly, and some by the PD. And if we have some capital funds in a reserve account on account, if a grant comes up that requires a 20% matching amount, then we have the money available instantaneously to apply for that grant, maybe be awarded the grant and receive the item. The fire truck was a big example of that. 4 years ago, the voters approved a $420,000 capital reserve fund amount for the fire department. We put it into the capital reserve fund. That was the year that the Tower Ladder Homeland Security grant became available. And the fire chief was one of, I would guess, thousands of people who'd applied for grant money. And because we had the $260,000 share of the $980,000 vehicle, we were able to take advantage of that Homeland Security grant and get the vehicle. If we had to wait for a public meeting, to bring it up and go to vote at the polls, I think that grant would have either failed at the polls or it would have been awarded to someone else. So there is a method to the madness to try to put a little money away and get ready for items. Other towns do that. Other towns do that exclusively. The town of Bedford does it exclusively. They have a whole array of savings accounts, and they put a little in each year, and when it comes time to buy a plow truck or a garbage truck or whatever they need, they've been saving for it for 5 or 6 or 8 years, and they're able to attain it more easily by that process. Brian?
That grant that you described, where they had money saved up and it gave it
Yes.
an advantage?
Yes.
Is that commonplace for those grants? Is that the bulk of the format for the grants that are out there?
Grants require a matching share in most cases. And I think Phil might be able to speak to that better than I can, but very rarely do you get up a 100% grant. Most grants are based on matching funds. Grassmere Town Hall got some grant money, and that was, I think, matching funds. Right, Phil?
We get some, though, that there was no match, or some of them it's an in-kind match.
Okay.
It's
So you can use services, donated
Right.
services.
And that's money you already have to have, well, not services, but that's in capital cases, that's money you have to have in a bank somewhere, sort of like a mortgage, you're putting 20% down. Okay.
So just so the planning board knows what I told the all boards meeting, I wanted you to be informed tonight so that you can mull it over, and when we do our CIP matrix presentation in 4 or 5 weeks,
Should
whenever
be
we
about
conclude.
8 weeks, actually.
8 weeks out still?
It's mid-August, I think.
You'll understand what I told the committee, and it won't come as a surprise to anybody on this board. Any more questions on the process, Barbara?
I just want to comment, I'm not going to get into a budget discussion, but if people are thinking about this, I just want to point out that capital reserve accounts are set up for a specific purpose, and when the funds are raised, they're for a specific purpose, and they cannot be used to purchase something else. And we were fortunate in the fire department grant situation that in fact that's what the funds had been raised for, so the chief was able to use them for the grant application. But it's not a case of where you can set up a capital reserve account as essentially a slush account. They have to be established for a specific purpose. And then just as to the town of Bedford, I think that goes to the point that you talked about all the little accounts that the town of Bedford has, because they have to be done. And there's a whole history and process as to why CIP was done, why those numbers used to be in the budget and why now they're not. Because at the same time as the budget process has changed, our own voting process has changed, so all of those factor in as to why the process and the outcome looks different, somewhat predictably today than it did even 10 years ago. And then the only other thing I'd like to say is that it's certainly to anybody's credit that they can put away money in a special account for special purposes and keep the fiscal discipline to stay on that path to actually get it. As the reference to having to buy a new car is hitting particularly close to home this year, and I'm not happy about that fact in my own budget. But some towns, such as Bedford, also take the approach that they let things get so bad that the voters ultimately do enter into what, frankly, in their case historically, has been huge bonds for road work. And that's actually been the strategy, to a certain extent, you could argue, in management of the town resources, is that keeping up, they can't, so they
Well-
eventually get bad enough, and there have been a couple of huge road bonds passed in that town.
Roads were exactly what you said, but as far as their actual town equipment goes, they have actually crested that hill, and they're on the good side of it now, because instead of keeping a snowplow truck for 10 or 11 years because you have to, they've begun these savings accounts through their taxation process, and instead of it being a pile of rust that's worth $3,000 when they're done with it, that they take to the state auction, they're on a 7-year schedule now, and they're turning them in to the dealers and getting $40,000 and $50,000 trade towards a new vehicle. So there is a value in keeping
I'm
them.
not gonna get into that discussion, because we
I know.
can go to cruisers and vehicles and all of that on CIP.
And just
We
last
know the
thing-
history.
The last thing is about the savings accounts, is I think we went away from it when they were approving things, because I don't think residents like the idea of the town taxing them and saving money. But now we are at the exact opposite of the spectrum. We don't have a successful capital improvement plan in the last few years. So I think we need to either change up the program and change the way we do business, or admit to another few years of failure. Because I believe that's where we're going, based on my past experience on the committee. All right, we had a motion to adjourn if no one else wants to talk about CIP anymore. Who was it?
Phil.
Phil, seconded by.
Sounds like we need to make it more attractive for businesses to come to town.
Mark?
Oh,
Seconded by Mark?
You.
Okay, motion to
You
adjourn.
need to go to CIP meetings,
All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Chair votes yes. Thank you, everyone, for coming.